Hello, my name is John Schmidt and I am the Electoral Commissioner for New South Wales. The 2024 local government elections involve over 5.5 million electors and will be one of the biggest community events held in New South Wales in 2024. With your help, we will establish close to 300 pre-poll venues and around 2,200 polling places across New South Wales on election day. We'll also employ more than 20,000 people to deliver the elections. This series of webinars is intended to provide councils with information to ensure a successful election for your local government area. The webinars include timeframes, processes and things that may impact councils during the election period. I hope your council finds the webinars helpful as we work together to deliver your elections. I and everyone at the New South Wales Electoral Commission look forward to delivering the 2024 local government elections with transparency, integrity, fairness and safety.
Good morning and welcome to the first webinar in the series for the 2024 local government elections. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we work today and the Aboriginal people participating in this webinar. I pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the land and waters of New South Wales. I want to now introduce ourselves. I'm Steve Robb.
Hi, I'm Alison McLennan.
Before we get into the content, if you have any questions through the course of the presentation, what we'd ask you to do is put them in via a messaging system. We have this messaging system called Slido. So you can either use your phone to scan the QR code and that'll take you straight to the question site, or you can just get onto slido.com and then put in the code #LG elections. We'll get the questions. What I'll do is we'll answer all the questions at the end because to answer them during the presentation just might take us off track a bit. If you're having any technical difficulties in getting to Slido or getting into the questions site, just drop us an SMS on 0408 039 679 and one of our technical guys will help you out. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take you through a few areas that you'll be interested in right now, and those are the timeline and key election dates, the election venues. We're already talking to some of you now about election venues, constitutional referenda and council polls, the electoral rolls. Without those, we can't have an election, and the communications from us to you and from us to electors and from you to electors. We'll talk about countback elections as well. These are a new initiative that came in at the last elections and have been quite a revelation. And then we'll tell you about some upcoming more council and candidate webinars. Before we get into that, I thought you'd just be interested to see some numbers. When we actually do the 2024 ordinary elections, they're going to be the biggest event in New South Wales for the year. There's 128 councils, as you all know, but 126 of them will require us to conduct their elections. Councils vary in size. You can see that the smallest are around about 900 electors and the biggest is almost 260,000 electors, quite a difference. We'll be electing 34 mayors. We'll be electing 1,240 councillors. But there'll be about 4,500 to 5,000 candidates. So there's a lot of work for us in that. And we'll be engaging more than 20,000 temporary staff, the majority of them for election day. We'll be printing 11.5 million ballot papers. The venues, the pre-poll venues and election day venues, they're just an estimate at this point in time, and we'll go into that a little bit later because we still haven't created the event and worked out all the projections yet. Once we've done the projections, that'll tell us how many venues we require for both pre-poll and election day. We think we'll have about 570,000 postal vote applications. we'll probably get round about 90,000 electoral inquiries. They'll more than likely come via telephone to our electoral inquiry centre. And we think we'll get at least 30% of the electors voting early. The early voting numbers are going up, and you probably saw in the latest referendum where the AEC had almost 50% of the electors voted early. So, election day, Saturday the 14th of September 2024. Just remember that date. That's absolutely critical. And what we want to do is we want to give you things like posters, artifacts, so that you can get the date in people's minds early, so that by the time that September the 14th comes around next year, people know that there's an election on. So we'll go through the key dates. You'll be able to see these dates on our website at elections.nsw.gov.au. We now have a site within the site that talks all about the 2024 elections. What we'll do is we'll build up more and more content on that site, and we'd recommend that you get on and you visit that site as regular as possible. So 30th of June, that one's where we require your final poll or referendum questions. The legislation will actually give you an extra month, but what we need to try and get the questions early so that we can work with you to make sure that the questions will give you the outcome that you require. We'll talk a little bit more about the questions as we go through the presentation. 5th of August is absolutely critical. That's the start of the regulated election period. That's when rolls close. In particular, for candidates to be nominated, they must be on the roll by that date. A week and a half later, on Wednesday the 14th of August at midday, nominations close. So that's a critical date again. The day after, we'll have done all the processing, all the nominations, and then by 2 p.m. on the 15th of August, we'll start conducting the ballot paper draw. All the ballot paper draws will be done in the RO offices around the state, so obviously you can visit each of the ballot paper draws. Once the ballot paper draws are complete, we will then start creating the ballot papers. By the 19th, we'll have the ballot papers printed, and we'll start sending out postal packs to all of those people who applied for a postal vote. 2nd of September is when pre-poll voting opens. Now, you'll notice that that's 2 weeks out from election day, and we've already come to you and asked you about what your preference is on the length of pre-poll voting. We'll talk about that at a later date, so at this point in time, we're just assuming that pre-poll will be 2 weeks again. Friday, the 6th of September, that's the close of registration of electoral materials. So that's when those candidates who want to issue how-to-votes on election day, that's the last opportunity for them to get the material registered to use on election day. Monday the 9th, it's when telephone voting registration opens. And what that means is that there'll be no iVote this year at this election, but we will offer telephone-assisted voting for the blind and low vision. So on that day, they can start registering and voting. On 5 p.m. on the same day, it's the close of postal vote applications. That means that no more applications can be received. The day before election day, pre-poll voting closes, and registration for telephone voting also closes. And then the 14th of September, the big day, election day. Now, the 3 dates below the election day are critical now. As you know now, we have to wait 13 days after the election to receive the last postal vote pack. That will determine when we can actually start doing the distribution of preferences. So that's on a Friday. On the Monday the 30th, we'll start doing the distribution of preferences, and that will probably take about 3 days. So we'll have the progressive distribution of preferences. That will then give us the results. We'll then publish the results on our website, and at that time, we'll then notify all the candidates of the results, and they will then have 24 hours to put in a challenge to the results, should they wish to do so. And that must be received in writing. So therefore, by the 1st to the 3rd of October, we'll have the declaration of results, assuming there are no challenges. If there are any challenges to a particular set of results, then that'll slow things down a little bit. But other than that, 1st to the 3rd is when the declaration results declaration of results will be made. That's important to you because you obviously have to start booking your first council meeting. So what we'd obviously strongly recommend is that you don't book your first council meeting before the 3rd of October. We'll put out a schedule of when we expect to declare the results by council, but at this point in time we haven't got that schedule done. So the venues. I'll just have a little drink. So there's 3 different types of venues, election venues. The returning officer's office, pre-poll venues and polling places. So we'll start with returning officer's offices. It's a terrible name because these aren't offices that we're looking for. They really are operations centres bordering on warehouses. What we have to do within the returning officer's office is receive materials. They come on pallets. Often we'll have multiple pallets for each returning officer's office. So ideally we'll have roller doors, we'll be able to back trucks in, we'll be able to take the pallets off using hand pallet trucks. We have to store all the materials for every single polling place. Lots of cardboard material, lots of forms. We have to use the returning officer's office for training all the polling place managers. We have to set up computer equipment for data entry for all the results. On results night, we take all the results coming in from every one of the polling places. And then we have to have all the staff in for first of all, the manual counting and then the data entry. And we have to be able to house all the scrutineers that we invariably get. As you can see, that's not an office. That's a big operations centre. And our offices will vary in size between somewhere around about 250 square metres to 700 square metres. So the sizable things. So we've already started talking to a lot of councils already about the availability of council venues for the returning officers' offices. Ideally, we would like to use council-owned venues for a couple of reasons. One, it'll help keep the cost down for you. But secondly, most council venues are accessible. We need them for about 14 weeks, and that's from July to October. The good thing about the returning officer's office is now we don't have to hold pre-poll voting in them. So they can actually be outside the centre of the local government area, and so therefore it can be in a warehouse type area. Doesn't have to be, but you know, if it just takes the pressure off an inner city type venue. Pre-poll venues. These are for the early voting period. 1 or 2 weeks, we don't know yet. So I'd suggest you think about 2 weeks for now. Ideally, the pre-poll venues will be in major population centres because you really want people to be able to walk in off the street, come in and vote. Ideally, they'll again be council-owned, and ideally they'll be accessible. Accessibility is absolutely key. We really want to focus on that as much as we can to make sure that people in wheelchairs, people with walking frames, people with mobility issues don't have any problems getting into any of these venues. And again, we need these for a couple of weeks, so it'd be great if they can be provided by councils. And again, we're talking to you about that. Polling places. We will get about somewhere between 2,200 and 2,500 polling places. They're just used for the one day. About 60% of them are schools. We have an MOU with the Department of Education. It means that we have first option of getting school halls. So it's very easy for us to book 60% of them being schools. The bad thing is about school halls that quite often they do have lips, they have stairs. They're not as accessible as other venues. So we do still like to try and get as many accessible venues as we can. And that's where, when we came out to ask you some questions about pre-poll period and accessibility, whether you could actually help us turn some of these non-accessible venues into accessible venues. And that's where, whether you've got ramps, whether there's anything that you can, anywhere where you can point us to that we can go and get things that will help us turn these venues into accessible venues. And of course, if council has polling places that, or venues that we can use for polling places, we'd certainly be interested in hearing from you. We do tend to migrate to the polling places we've used in the past. It's good if we can stick with the same polling places at local government, at state government, and at federal government elections, because people are creatures of habit. They keep going to the same place. The only time we'd really change is if there's a brand new venue just round the corner that's much more accessible. Constitutional referenda and polls. So I'll just go through some key dates here. I mentioned earlier on about the provision of the final poll and referendum questions. The legislation will give you about another month to provide those questions. We recommend that you get them in no later than the end of June. The sooner you can tell us that you're having a referendum and or a poll, and you send us the resolution, the earlier we can start planning for it. Because we need to hire additional staff, we need to get additional staff for the day, we need to get additional materials, and so on. And also we have to work with you on the questions. And I'll go into the questions on the next slide, but it's important to get the questions right. If you leave it too late, we won't have a chance to work with you on the questions. And there is no formal approval process, not with us or not with OLG. So we can help you, but you've got to give us enough time to give you thoughts on getting the questions right. If we can get the questions in by no later than the end of June, then we will start creating the ballot paper artwork. And then we will actually send the artwork out to yourselves so that you can review it and you can approve it before we then go and print. And we like to get those printed and the mayoral ballot papers printed before we then start printing all the massive number of councillor ballot papers. Then we have election day and declare the results at the start of October. So referenda. These are you have a referendum to change the constitution of the council. So there's only a limited number of things that you can do or ask at a referendum. So you can change the way that the mayor is elected, from popular elected to council elected or vice versa. You can increase or reduce the number of councillors. You can divide the area into wards or abolish the wards or change the method of election of the councillors. In some instances, you can have councillors that represent the entire area together with some councillors that represent just the wards. Voting is compulsory in a referendum, and council must adhere to the outcome of the referendum. So if the answer is yes, we'd like to have a popularly elected mayor, come 2028, that's when you would be having a ballot paper for a mayoral election. Council polls. You can ask anything in a council poll. You know, for instance, whether you introduce fluoride into the drinking water or construct a roundabout in the main street or have people parking at an angle, whatever you want. Voting is not compulsory, but you know, if you're doing it in conjunction with the councillor elections, then people will just get given the ballot papers anyway, so it'd be a little bit strange if they didn't vote. You're not compelled to adhere to the outcome of the poll. So if 90% of the electorate said yes and 10% said no, you could go with the no's. It's really up to you. This is just guidance for yourselves. So the question format is really important. So this slide here is talking about how important it is to be clear with the question. People have got to understand what they're voting for, what they're saying yes or no about. And if you don't make it clear, you won't get a sensible answer. So if a question has too many words, or if it has multiple questions within the question, you won't know what they're saying yes to. So for instance, that's saying, do you favour the election of a mayor by electors with the number of wards reduced? So you've already got two questions. So if somebody says yes, what are they saying yes to? So you've got to be really clear about it. So alternatively, you can go for multiple questions on the ballot paper. So this one It splits it down nicely and says, should the mayor be popularly elected? Yes or no. Should the number of councillors in each ward be reduced from 3 to 2? Yes or no. Should wards be abolished? Yes or no. So you can get a very clear outcome. Two other things to think about here. One is the more questions, the more staff we have to have, because each question is a separate count. So we would count all the ballot papers for should the mayor be popularly elected, get the outcome, put all the ballot papers back in, count for the second question, put them all back in, count for the third question. So upsides and downsides. The other thing to think about is that you've got to ensure that if people answer in a certain way, can it be achieved? Can the outcome be achieved? And will it still be legal? And will it be feasible? So say, for instance, if you reduce the number of wards and reduce the number of councillors, you went from three wards with 9 councillors to 2 wards with 7 councillors. Well, you've now got 3.5 councillors per ward. You can't have that. So you've really got to think about what the outcome will be depending on the answers that you get. And that's where we can help you as well. If you come in too late with the questions, we won't have time to help you. You might end up with something that you can't achieve, which is going to be a big problem for you. And finally, here's a lovely, phrased question. Do you favour reducing the number of councillors from 10 to 8? What you'd also do is you create a campaign such that if you're going to go for a referendum, you'd have to make sure that the public knew what they were going to see when they came into the polling place. You don't want them to see the ballot paper for the first time and go, oh, I didn't know about this. And it really has to be a well-balanced campaign. You can't really favour one side or the other, so you have to put that out to the public. Okay, let's go into electoral rolls. Oh, press the wrong button there. Obviously, without the electoral rolls, we can't have an election. So I'll just go through some of the key dates. August the 5th, we've already mentioned that, close of rolls. Now that's mainly for the purpose of being nominated. So if candidates and the nominators aren't on the roll by 6 p.m. on the 5th of August, they can't be a candidate or they can't be a nominator. And also one of the other things the roll close does is it then allows us to then go ahead and create the roll products and print the rolls. I'll explain that in a minute. So the day after the rolls close, we require councils to certify their non-residential roll. So you will have been putting together a non-residential roll. I'll explain that. And we need that certification to come in by 12 noon. And then on the Wednesday, we will start printing the rolls. So everything's very tight for us. So there's not a lot of leeway for us to wait for someone that's not ready. So I'll explain the types of rolls. So 3 different types of rolls. Residential roll, non-residential roll, and there's a composite roll. So residential roll, that's one thing that we look after. We work on and create the roll throughout the year with the Australian Electoral Commission as well. So we work in conjunction with the Federal Commission to keep your roll up to date. So we have a residential roll for each council area and ward, and we prepare those for every election. Anyone that's on the residential roll must vote. The non-residential roll. This is one thing that seems to confuse councils every election, and what we're thinking of doing is having a separate webinar to go into some of the more tricky things, and I think this will be one of them. But anyway, let's just explain it at the moment. The non-residential role comprises a role of non-residential electors and what's called the role of occupiers and rate-paying lessees. This is your role, and this is prepared by you and your team, and the general manager or CEO is responsible for this role. This isn't our role, this is your role. Electors must apply to get onto the non-residential role, and you'll actually find templates and a fact sheet on our website, and I think they're probably going up today. You have to customize the forms to show your contact details. But other than that, all the details are the same for every council. There's two different types of forms. The forms are reasonably self-explanatory, and the fact sheet will explain that as well. Once you start creating your non-residential role, you must make it available to any member of the public that walks in the door to have a look at it. The role itself expires immediately after the election, and then you have to create a new one. Voting isn't compulsory for electors on the non-residential role. So even if somebody applies and goes to the extent of applying, and you accept them and we accept them and we put them on the roll, if they don't vote, they don't get fined. Once we have both the residential and the non-residential role, we combine them. And we combine them, and that combined role is called the composite role. That composite role then becomes the authorised roles for the entire election. And I've already mentioned that the close of rolls is at 6 p.m. Monday the 5th. And that's really, that's for both the residential and the non-residential roles. So that's a really important point for you to know as well, because we've had occasions in the past where councils have received application forms before 6 p.m. on close of roll day, not processed them at all, and then a couple of days later found some forms and said, oh my God, those people should still be included in the non-residential role. If that comes late to us, that might mean we can't include them. So you've got to be really diligent about those applications that come in. It also applies for the purposes of roll printing. So for those people who are new to the roll or haven't updated the roll details before 6 p.m. on Monday the 5th, they won't be shown on the printed electoral roll. So when they turn up to a polling place, they won't be found. That doesn't mean to say that they can't vote, they just won't be found on the printed roll. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, candidates must be enrolled by that time, and their nominators. Otherwise, nominators can't nominate them, and the candidates just can't be a candidate. So it's really critical that candidates and nominators know that. Communications between us, to you, and to electors. I'll have another drink. So, try as we might, we can't reach every elector. We will do what we believe to be the most cost-effective campaign we can. We can't just keep throwing money at it because it's your money. So we really need to work with you to be able to reach every elector. So we want to collaborate as much as possible. So we'll share content with you. We'll obviously create these webinars to help you. We'll create election updates. We've already produced one which you've received. There's another one coming out next week, I believe, and we'll just put these out on a regular basis. We'll also create what's called a resources hub, and I'll mention that a little bit later, or maybe in the next slide. You can also contact us. We have this a new email address that we've created at councilelections@elections.nsw.gov.eu. I'd really encourage you to communicate to us using that. A lot of you will probably have my email address. That's great. But if you just send something to me and I'm not around, or I miss it, or I'm on leave, or I got really, really sick or whatever, we won't get the email. So I'd encourage you to use that email address. There's a lot of people on that distribution list, so they'll be able to see the email, and the right person will be able to pick it up and answer you. If you wanted to speak directly to the communications team, they also have an email address, nswecmedia@elections. So if your media team want to speak to the comms team, use that one. Otherwise, just use the council elections. I'd really, really encourage you to use that. The resources hub. We'll put a number of things on there that you can use, such as advertisements. That'd be for if you want to put ads in the local papers. We don't put ads in the local papers now. The readership is so low that we don't find it a good use of your money. However, you may want to, especially in some of the more remote areas. And I know that some of the newspapers are quite bold at saying, if you don't advertise with us, we're not going to mention your election at all. So we'll provide some content for some of the ads that you might want to put in your local paper. Also, social media, we'll create some nice tiles and so on that we can put on the website and you can use. And we'd also encourage you to follow us in social media. And I'm sure that people that know more about social media than me will understand what I'm saying. We'll also create election posters for you that you can just pull down and you can print off. And certainly things like flyers that will go with your rates notices and things like that will help you with those so that you can get the message out as early as possible. And I mentioned earlier on about we want you to save the date and let people know about the date. We'll create things called save the date posters, artifacts, that again you can print out and you can put all around your community. We'll also create a frequently asked questions site that you can then pull down onto your own site. So if people have questions about the election, they'll be able to go through that and answer their own questions. And we do a lot of translated information into many languages. I can't even remember how many languages we do. But for those areas that have a lot of non-English speaking electors, then we'll have translated information that you can use. Countback elections, these were an initiative by the government that was introduced after the 2021 elections. Councils had to pass a resolution at the first meeting of the newly constituted council to adopt Countback. And out of the 128 councils, 99 passed a resolution. It's very good. It was very new to us, but once we got into the groove, we found it a very good mechanism. And what it is, you can use Countback in the first 18 months of the new council's term. So if you have a casual vacancy, if a councillor resigns or a councillor passes away or whatever, and you have a vacancy, and you've passed a resolution to say that you have a Countback election, we can conduct that for you. It's conducted by using the same ballot papers that we used in the ordinary election. So in that case, in the December 21 elections. In this case, if you pass a resolution after the September 2024 elections, you'll be able to use Countback all the way up to March 26. And what we effectively do is each ballot paper with the vacating councillor as preference, the preference is just passed on to the candidate with the next highest preference on the ballot paper. Countback isn't applicable to uncontested elections, so and also mayoral elections. So if you lose your mayor, you can't use Countback, and also if you have an uncontested ward. So if you have three councillors required, you've got 3 candidates, lovely, it's uncontested, but if one of them leaves, you must go for a by-election. The benefits of Countback, it's very, very, very cost effective. The costs are dramatically lower than the cost of a by-election. So I'd encourage you to sort of think seriously about passing a resolution for Countback. It's very time efficient as well. So with a casual vacancy in a by-election, we have to fill the vacancy within 3 months. For Countback, it's within 49 days, and often we can do it much quicker than that. If council is in a real hurry, we can do it. We can compress the time frame. And the community isn't required to vote again. So that's good where communities have got election fatigue. I mean, we're just going through now, where we had the 2021 elections, we had the 23 election, we've just had the referendum, and now we have the 24 elections. People will be getting fatigued. So if you don't have to get them to come out again, they'll be very happy with you. We've got a couple more webinars that we've planned and for you, for councils. The first one is, and we haven't really set the dates at the moment. We think the next one will probably be around about March. That one we think will probably go into more detail about some of the trickier things, but we're really, and trickier things being we'd like to talk in more detail about things like non-residential roll, and Countback, so it can really explain Countback and really go into detail of how you're going to save a lot of money on Countback. But anything else that you're interested in, we'd be more than happy to go into detail for you if you're not sure of any part of the election. And then we'll take you through the operational part of the elections as well. So we've got 2 listed down there, but it could be many more. And we could just do half-an-hour ones or 20-minute ones. It doesn't have to be an hour. For candidates, it's a lot more complex for candidates. So we've actually got, 3, 6, 9. Is that 9 or 8? Webinars already for candidates. Being a candidate requires a lot more, there's a lot more technical issues that candidates have to come to grips with. We normally put together a large candidate handbook, and it's heavy going for some candidates, so we've decided to turn those into webinars and make it a lot easier for candidates. And just like these webinars for councils, they'll also be loaded onto the website as well. So, just in case you missed at the start of the webinar there, we have this site that allows you to put questions to us. So you can either use your phone to scan the QR code, or you can just go onto slido.com and then in the code put hashtag LG elections, and then you can put questions. Looks like we've had some questions come in, so we're happy to start answering some of the questions.
So we'll start looking at some of the questions that have come in, and probably touch on some of the points we've covered, but it's great to relook at these as well, just to really emphasise the dates. So we have been asked if the presentation will be made available afterwards.
The answer is yes. We'll have this on our website. Give us a day or two to get it finalised and get it onto the website. And I'm not sure, we will probably end up sending you a link. Because we have all your email addresses, we'll send you a link to it, and then you'll be able to view it again and again, because I'm sure that you'll love to watch it again.
Yeah, so look out for that. Council elections at elections.newsouthwales.gov.au. We'll be sending it from there. Okay, we have been asked what the cut-off date is for constitutional amendments, so those referendums.
So the cut-off date is actually the close of roll, August the 5th. I just say, if you leave it that late, it'd be difficult for us, and it could end up being a problem for you, because if you don't actually get your questions right, then, and you submit them on the 5th of August, that could be a real problem for both you and us. So I'd encourage you to don't wait till the legislated time, do it much earlier if you can.
Great. And what is the date of the council election?
September the 14th,
September the 14th. Great. And when does council need to resolve the countback question?
It has to be in your first council meeting of the newly constituted council. So a lot of councils will then have a meeting. I think you've got to have one within 3 weeks of the declaration, especially if you're going to elect a council-elected mayors. Don't forget, you must include that question in that council meeting. There was at least 2 councils at 2021 who were in a rush to get the first meeting organised, who forgot to include it in that first meeting, wanted to include it in their second meeting, and the legislation wouldn't allow them, so they couldn't go Countback. So you must make sure that it's included in your first the agenda for your first council meeting. Great.
And talking about communication, when do councils generally start communicating with residents?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. We kind of ask ourselves the same question. When is too early and when is too late? One of the things that we'd recommend that you do is, when you're sending out your rates notices, and you might send those out at the start of the year, just put in a flyer that says, say the date, say the date, say the date. But I think that we start our own campaigning around about the middle of the year, around about June-ish, and then we start ramping up. Too early and people will just ignore it. Too late and people go, oh, I didn't know. So around about the middle of the year, June, July, is probably a good start, I think.
Okay, we have a question about iVote. So why is iVote not being used for the 2024 council elections? Well, the legislation does not allow for iVote for the 2024 council elections.
We were given a special dispensation for the 2021 council elections to use iVote because of COVID at the time. But we did have an issue on election day with iVote, even though 670,000 electors used iVote and thought it's fantastic. There was about 30,000 people that did want to use iVote and couldn't. And in the end, we had a serious review of iVote. And in fact, if you want to, you'll see there's a documented review on our website about internet voting. Have a look at that. But we decided until we're ready to fix the problems that came up on election day, we won't be pushing iVote.
What are the dates of the caretaker period?
I believe it's a month before the election. If I'd be happy to get back to you on that one, but I'm pretty sure it's a month. It's something like 4 weeks before the election.
Sure. So these questions, I believe, will be shared, and the answers we can share as well after the webinar, so that we have these for you as well. Okay. Do councils ever put rate increase, SRV, to residents in council polls?
Never seen it, but that doesn't mean to say it can't happen. You'll actually see past questions on our website. So if you go into elections.nsw.gov.au and look under elections, past election results, you'll see, I can't remember how many elections we go back, but you'll see all the poll and referendum questions that we have on the website, and you'll be able to check there. I don't recall seeing that, but it doesn't mean to say it's never been asked.
Okay. We have a question, is there an issue with the website at the moment?
Not that I know, but I believe that we've only just put the 2024 election onto the website, and then some of the information that's going to be useful for you, we haven't opened that up yet. We're just reviewing those pages right now. So bear with us, give us 2 or 3 days, and we'll have everything up, and you'll be able to use the resources that are there. And the resources will increase. So we're at a very early stage. We're 10 months out from the election. We'll start building up the content over the coming months. And by the time that we get very close to the election, you'll have everything. You'll have maps. You'll have all the polling places. You have whether the polling places are accessible or not. You have the addresses, the ROs, offices, everything. There'll be everything that you'll want. But it will take time for us to start putting things on there.
Yeah, and if you're having any problems with the website, just let us know. So you can let us know through that email address that we provided, or you can call us as well. We can be contacted on 1300 135 736, and we can talk you through any of the questions that you're trying to resolve by looking at that website, and we'll talk you through that. We have a question about Countback. So we've touched on a few things about Countback. So just that date again to resolve the question about Countback for councils.
It's actually not a date. It's at your first meeting of the newly constituted council.
Okay. What is the cut-off date for candidate nominations?
You're right. So the nominations open on the 5th of August. Nominations close 12 noon on Wednesday, the 14th of August.
Great. And which councils are not using New South Wales EC?
It's Fairfield City and Liverpool City. And even though they're not having us manage the operation, we still provide all the rolls and all the enrolment support, and we provide all the compliance support as well. So it's only the operational part that we don't do. They do a combination of themselves, and a commercial provider does that part for them.
Great. And when will the resources be available for the pre-election candidate sessions?
The pre-election candidate sessions. I'm not 100% sure what the pre-election candidate sessions are. We don't now. We used to in the past go out to councils and go around the entire state and do face-to-face sessions. it was expensive, it was time consuming, and often we found that we had more presenters than candidates turn up. So what we do now is we do the webinars, and we do them a combination of live so that people can ask questions, and we put them on the website as well. And we have help desks that people can phone up at any time and ask questions. It's normally the candidates that have lots and lots of questions. The councils themselves will probably run their own. You'll find that I've been to a few of those where they're pretty good. Especially it might mean what does it mean to be a councillor in X council, and it's really good. And sometimes local government New South Wales, they will provide a service to send somebody out to do a presentation for you as well. But we do ours now via webinars.
So I think we just touched on that in the next question when we talk about what role do councils have in the information training or pre-induction of those candidates.
Just what I just mentioned. It's important that candidates understand what it means to be a councillor. Now, we can't tell people that, and Local Government New South Wales can't tell you that, or ORG can't tell you that. It's really good for councils to run their own sessions to say, if you become a councillor with us, this is what's expected of you. This number of meetings, this amount of commitment, this is how we work. This is the pressure that you're under. I've seen some very, very good ones. But I think it's a good thing for you to run them.
You can also contact us. We have our candidates team who are available to take your questions as well. We're available to help at any time that you have those questions. So how do you stop candidates making extreme or false claims?
Well, it's a good question. We have a disinformation register that will be on our website. I think it might already be there. And you probably saw that the AEC ran the same sort of disinformation register back in 22. We're taking this a lot more seriously now because there's a lot more claims that are coming out. So we have a disinformation register that will be built up and up and up. And it just means then if somebody's actually showing something on a poster that's not breaking the law, but it's a false claim, we can counter that false claim on our register. But it does mean then people will have to find the register for us to be able to counter that false claim.
Great. It looks like we don't have any more questions.
Okay. Well, if you do have any more questions, please send them in to the council elections at elections.nsw.gov.au, and we'll be happy to answer them. And of course, we'll let you know when the next council webinar is coming up. We'll also let you know, if you're interested, about the candidate webinars, because I'm sure that the candidates will come to you as well and ask you questions. So it might be useful for you to send some people to attend the candidate webinars as well. But anyway, they'll probably happen after Christmas. If you don't have any more questions, we'll call it a day and we'll give you 10 minutes of your day back.
Thank you.
Thanks for everyone for turning up.